Welcome to the Washington, D.C. 3-day itinerary. This has been made up of a handful of trips I have taken to D.C. over my lifetime, but mostly my recent trips. So I grew up going to D.C. most years for Christmas. I went in high school every year for class trips. During 2020, JP and I did a big road trip across the whole country, and he went to D.C. for the first time. Last year, we were doing like an East Coast road trip and went to DC for a few days. We are going this summer. So it is just kind of a combination of all the different times that we've been and just our best recommendations. This video here is from that 2020 road trip that we took. It was like I think it was 52 days all over the country. So this video is just from that trip specifically. So the first day, I recommend just hanging out around the National Mall. It's basically just a big lawn that has monuments, memorials, museums, things like that. It's really the center of like tourism for DC. Everything is free to go to. There's some things that could have some upsells, but in general, you could spend the entire day walking the National Mall, going to the monuments, the memorials, touring buildings, going through the museums, and it won't cost you a penny other than food. What I like to do is just kind of start at one end and go to the other. You can do this in reverse if you want, because this will start with the Lincoln Memorial and a bunch of free stuff that's just kind of where you're walking around. And then at the other end is tours that you can like book times for inside of buildings. So if it's easier to start your day booking times in the morning and then venture out to where you're just looking around at stuff on your own time later in the day, then that works too. So you can always take this in reverse. So on the far end is the Lincoln Memorial. It is these big steps up here with the Abraham Lincoln statue in the middle, and out front of it is the reflecting pool that leads you towards the Washington Monument, which is kind of like in the center. I believe, depending on when you're watching this, they are opening up a little mini museum underneath it about Abraham Lincoln. So depending on when you're watching this, that may or may not be available yet. If you've seen the movie Forrest Gump, you'll like this area. The next memorial, as you start making your way down the mall, is the Korean War Veterans Memorial. This one's really cool, especially. It's nice in like spring and summer when everything is green, but if you go like early morning or late hours when it's super foggy, it looks like they're trekking through fog, and it just looks really neat. I don't have any pictures of that, but if you can imagine it, it looks exactly how you would think. As you keep making your way down the mall, you will come across the World War II Memorial. This one is newer than most of them. Like, I remember this one being new, but it is already 20 years old. But this one also just looks very nice. Next up, you will finally come across the Washington Monument. That is this big tower here. You can go up inside of it. You can get tickets to go up the steps to the top. I've never done it just because, usually when you go to DC, you're doing a good amount of walking, and I don't need all of these extra steps on top of that. But it's something cool to kind of check off your bucket list. At nighttime, depending on when you're visiting, there may or may not be like a projection show. They've been playing around with that a little bit lately, so you may see something like that. And from this point, so from the Lincoln Memorial to the Washington Monument, you're just kind of walking a straight line like on this sidewalk. But once you get to the Washington Monument, if you turn to your left, you will see the back side of the White House. You can make a little loop around it if you would like to see the whole thing, because you definitely want to see like the front lawn of it. You can also tour the White House, but it's really hard to get one. You have to reach out to your senator and local representative offices. Usually if you just Google like who is my local representative or who is the senators of the state, their main page will have like a kind of visitors thing where you just fill out a form where it's like, oh, what days are you visiting, who all is, how many people, we'll see what we have. I believe you have to for sure do it 2 weeks out, but they want you to submit it as early as possible just so you could potentially get a spot. You can also reach out for them for all kinds of other tours too. Like, anybody can go do a tour of the Capitol building, and you can just go get the tickets yourself when you show up. But your representative can also set that up for you, where you just go through security and you'll meet like their intern rep in there, and they will have the tickets and everything for you, so you don't have to wait in that extra line. But they have this for like, a lot of them will have them for like 4 or 5 different tours. Like, you can tour the FBI building, the Supreme Court, Library of Congress, they can help set up all of that for you. So if you come around to the front side of the White House, this is what you will be able to see. There is huge fencing up there, but the bars are pretty open, so you can like put your phone up to it to take a good picture. If you are there in spring, there are cherry blossoms. I don't actually know if these are cherry blossom trees at all. It was just, I don't think I've ever gone when they've been in full bloom. So this is vaguely what they would look like. These could be cherry blossoms, I don't know. But these aren't like the cherry blossoms that they would be referring to that line the whole like river waterway. But those are nice if you are able to plan your trip in the springtime. Next up is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. This is the long wall of names. I actually don't have a photo of this one from any trip, but you would recognize it if you saw it. There's also the Smithsonian Castle. You will see this big castle just right there on the lawn. It's the headquarters for the Smithsonian. If you have seen the Night at the Museum movies, this is, you know, part of all of that. If that might be a good thing to have, either for you to watch before you go, just to see the different things around DC, or have your kids watch before they go, because then they'll recognize some of these places. Once you've made it to the other end of the National Mall, so along the way there's going to be all these different museums, and one way you could do this itinerary is just go from one end to the other, stopping at every place along the way and doing like one half of the mall one day and one half the other day, so that you have a mix of like museums and just memorials. But I set it up this way where you kind of pass through the whole thing a couple times. So once you've made it to the other end, you will be at the Capitol building. So this is free to tour. And depending on what is going on at the time, your senator or representative may be able to set up an additional tour where you can go into the House and Senate chambers. But that's one of those things that you'll have to do in advance, and depending on what's happening at the time that you are visiting. But here's our photo that we got. Mike Turner is our representative, and that's whose office was able to set everything up for us. So we just met one of his interns there. You know, he was just holding up the little binder, so we just had to look for him, and he gave us our tickets and set us up and sent us on our way. Behind that is going to be the Library of Congress. If you've seen the National Treasure movie, this is kind of a big scene. It's where like the president's secret book is kept. Again, tickets are free to go inside. You just have to get like a timed ticket. And the inside looked really, really cool. Even so, the main room that you'll recognize from the movie is its own separate thing. There's a balcony you can go to overlook it, but to get a tour down through that actual room, they have specific times throughout the day. And also, if you're like a grad student researcher type of thing, you can also get like a special pass to like go do your research in there. That's another way to get to see the room. But the inside of this is very cool. It is very like palatial on the inside. There's lots of different quotes, and there's even like little mini museums inside. It was very cool. I had never been before last year, and that was a nice little highlight. Next to that is the Supreme Court building. You can also go inside here and get a free ticket. It's like a self-guided walking tour, and they also do courtroom lectures throughout the day that you can listen in on. I've actually never been inside the Supreme Court building, so maybe we will prioritize that for our next trip, but that is also another kind of cool place that you can go inside, and all of these are free. Some of them you'll see here that I have links here to like book your guided tour. So some of them you can book like an additional small group guided thing that is paid, but if you just Google, like Capitol building tour, Library of Congress tour, if you go on the government website for that, you can just set it all up for free. You really don't need the paid tours. The only time I would recommend it is, we did go last year. It was mid-May, maybe towards the end of May. It wasn't Memorial Day weekend, but it was in the weeks leading up to that. All the 8th graders were there for all their class trips, and there were just buses and buses and buses of kids. So to get into every building, like we waited in line an hour to get inside the Capitol building just to go through security. So we had to be like emailing the rep's office to be like, we're coming, we're here, we're just waiting. And I had never seen lines like that before. So in that case, if you're going at a particularly busy time, then that could be something to look into. It also might be something cool to do, like if you've done these tours before and to just kind of do it in a different way. That's also an option. So in DC, if you're really just kind of there for all the, monuments and museums and stuff, by about 6 o'clock, everything is closed. You can obviously walk around the mall all night long and look at the memorials. I believe they have some lighting around there, so it's not like it's just going to be like pitch black. And some of them might look cooler at night too. But in general, the things to do are kind of done by about 6 o'clock. So something that we like to do is do city tours. Sometimes we'll do like a trolley tour, like hop on, hop off trolley tour, or like carriage tour. DC in particular, though, we decided to do a ghost tour. It's actually one of the most popular destinations for ghost tours. We like to do them on the first day that we're there to just kind of get acquainted with your surroundings a little bit more. You can get recommendations from the guide for things to do, places to eat, places to avoid, just cool little things. So we like to do it early on in the trip. And this one here, you meet at the Treasury building, which is kind of just on the backside of the White House. And you'll just kind of make a loop around a few blocks over the course of about an hour or so. And you will get to hear all of the ghost stories surrounding that area, and that's really fun to do. This was one of the places that we stopped at on the tour, the Blair House. This is like across the street from the White House. It's where a lot of like foreign dignitaries will be hosted. This is where they'll stay when they come to visit. So for the second day is when you will walk the National Mall again, but this time you're just going to go around to all the different museums. It's a good inside day. This is good, like if the weather's going to be a little iffy, like one day looks really nice and the other day is kind of like sketchy. You're not really sure if it's going to rain or storm. Then it's like on the nice day, make sure you do all like the outside stuff. And then on the crappy day, plan to be inside. Like, yeah, you'll have to walk from museum to museum, but it's not super far, so you won't be outside for more than a few minutes at a time. So day 2, these are some of my favorite museums. You can do these in an order that makes more sense. Some of them do timed tickets, so they're still free to visit. All the Smithsonian's are free, but sometimes you do have to book a timed ticket. I know the last time we went to the Air and Space Museum, we had to have a timed ticket. For the National Archives, we had to have a ticket. It was a free ticket, but I don't think it was timed. I think it was just for the day. You just had to kind of register. So for each one that you want to go to, just make sure you look into it before you go, because they all have kind of different things, but they're all free. So the Air and Space Museum, again, Night at the Museum movies, you'll like this one. They have the Wright Flyer, which was that first airplane that the Wright brothers flew. And they have, the entire history of air and space up to, modern future things. The American History Museum is my favorite museum. This is like the pop culture type of stuff. So they have like a collection of dresses that the first ladies have worn. They have like the ruby slippers from Wizard of Oz. They just have all the pop culture American history things. They even had a game where you could play. Was it The Price is Right or was it something else? Now I'm forgetting. But they had one of the popular game shows, and now I'm forgetting if that's what it was or not. Maybe it was like Wheel of Fortune or something that you could play. There's a lot of interactive stuff, lots of just neat things on display all the time. National Archives is also a must-do. That is where they have the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights. You can go right up to them. It's just this one tundra room where all the documents are laid out kind of in like a half circle. And they have some other rotating ones too that come in every so often that are, essentially as old as these are. So this is a really nice one to go to. This one is always going to be crowded. You will always kind of have to like push your way a little bit to the front. If you just kind of sit and wait your turn, everyone's just going to keep coming past you and you're never going to get up to the front. So you kind of have to just keep shuffling yourself forward, mindfully, obviously. Again, our last visit, we were there when all the 8th graders were there, so that was not ideal, but but it's a very cool place to go see. The Natural History Museum, pretty much every city has one of these. This is going to be more so like where you see the big like dinosaur sculptures and woolly mammoths and stuff like that. Again, for the Night at the Museum people, this will be a good one. These last couple ones are going to be, or I guess this next set of ones are going to be ones, they're not quite right there on the National Mall, but they're in like the general vicinity. So kind of on the far side. So if if you consider like the White House side of it to be the near side, then Holocaust Museum would be far side. That museum is really well done. It's very elaborate. You get a little booklet of your identity, and as you go through, you find out if you survived the Holocaust or not. They have really nice memorials there. It's a museum that I always went to on my school trips, and I've been many times. A newer museum that's really cool. This one is paid. It's donation based. They have a recommendation that I want to say is like $15 or $20 per person. And like the way they put you on the list to get in is based off of like the more you donate, the higher they'll put you on the list to come in sooner. We went right when they opened though, so there wasn't really like a wait anyway, but I think we did like $10. But yeah, it is donation based, and they have their suggested thing. We did $10 each. But this room is replicas of rooms all throughout the White House. It's set up for like photo ops and interactive kind of stuff. So like how you see all those like Instagram pop-up museums now, this is like that, but super elaborate and designed for the White House. So you can like walk in the Oval Office, you can sit at the desk. They have the different like ballrooms, and I believe the Situation Room. They even have a podium where you can choose like a speech that it'll read you off the teleprompter, and it has like a little backdrop, and you can sit at a podium and like record yourself saying the speech. I think it's like Reagan's Berlin Wall speech, and then JFK's Ask Not What Your Country Can Do For You speech. I believe those were the two options, but different stuff like that. There may be different things when you go. But this museum was really cool, and it's pretty new and just super interactive. Day 3 is more historic sites around DC, but you're kind of venturing away from the National Mall this time. So this will require some driving if you go to all of these, maybe an Uber if it's like, a mile away and, you don't want to walk 50,000 steps in a day. So first up is Ford's Theater. This is actually only a few blocks from the National Mall, so not super far away. This is where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. When I used to go here in like middle school, they would take us up to the balcony and they had the chair there like with the blood. But I have heard that is not a thing anymore, and that they had a museum kind of in the basement level of some stuff. So I don't know exactly what the tour setup of it now is, but this is what it looks like, and you can go inside and get the full story. Down the street is the Peterson House. This is where they took Lincoln after he was shot and where he ended up dying. So you can walk through the room and see the bed. The bed is like a normal like twin size bed that you'd see in like a dorm room, and then he's like this big guy, so like his feet were like hanging off the edge and stuff. But those are kind of like two things that you do in tandem, because it's kind of a continuation of that story. You can also head out to the National Zoo. It is one of the top zoos in the US. It's a little bit of a drive, but not like that unrealistic. And actually something else that I should add to here too is if you're already going to be venturing out where you're driving, like the National Cathedral or National Shrine, those are really nice churches to check out if you like to see that kind of like architecture and things like that, or even just to like go to a mass while you're traveling to just see how it's different somewhere else. Old post office. This is currently a Waldorf Astoria, but I used to go here again like middle school, and in kind of the lobby they had all these different like souvenir shops, and they have a glass elevator on the inside, so as it takes you up the lobby you're like overlooking all the floors, and it takes you up to this little bell tower. I haven't been in there since probably like 2012 is probably the latest, so I don't know the exact situation, but to even just go see it, the building looks really nice and you can walk around as well. Something really neat that we did on the trip that we did in 2020, because all the museums were closed, but you could do anything that was outside. So we went to the National Arboretum, which is just kind of like a gardens and park kind of thing. They have the original Capitol building columns just like standing up here in a field, but they looked really cool. It was really nice to kind of walk around, and it's just like a really just kind of random activity that like who would have known that was out there. You'll also want to go to Arlington National Cemetery. So this is if you are looking at the Lincoln Memorial head on, it's kind of like behind it and to the side of it. You can see the changing of the guard ceremony. Again, this is free. And you can also see where JFK is buried, and these gravestones go on forever and ever and ever. it's a very nice place to visit and walk around. I believe they even have a tram that can take people around to different sections. I believe I saw that last time I was there. So this is something to do too. If you have a shorter trip, by the way, this is something to prioritize. Like, this is part of like day one stuff. Like, if you're only there for one day, I would definitely make the loop around the National Mall, go to Arlington, and prioritize like a couple different tours. Like, I'd probably do the Capitol building, and then do a museum or two, definitely National Archives, and then whatever museum kind of interests you the most, and then probably also the Library of Congress, because that was just such a nice building. So you could squeeze all of that into one day if you're shorter on time. There's also the Jefferson Memorial. So this is like across the water from the National Mall. So it gets significantly less visitors because there's just not as much foot traffic coming through, but it looks really nice, obviously. So make sure you set aside some time on your trip to go check that one out. And then for a bonus day, if you have more time, just outside of DC is George Washington's Mount Vernon estate. It looks like this. You've probably seen or heard of it. This could actually be an all-day thing. I have a post here with like a full breakdown of visiting, but like you can tour the whole house and the grounds. They have demonstrations all throughout the day. They have a little like documentary movie that you watch when you first come. They have a restaurant there that's really good. So I recommend planning like a half day, 3/4 day thing. Like, you'll want to be there for like 5 or 6 hours to kind of see and everything. There's that much, and little like museum exhibit galleries and stuff. It's a very cool thing to do if you have some extra time in the area. So something that I haven't touched on yet is where to eat throughout this whole thing. So obviously it's going to depend on where you kind of end up putting yourself at different times that you're ready to eat. But something that I do for all of my trips is I research like if there's any, I literally just Google like historic restaurants in wherever or famous restaurants in wherever to see if there's any that, because even if it may not be like old, it may have some sort of like cultural significance. Like a movie was filmed here or something like that. So my top recommendations, these are kind of in order of how I recommend them, but first is the Old Ebbitt Grill. It is the oldest continuously operating bar and restaurant in DC. It's been around since 1856. If you don't have a reservation, you'll usually have to wait for a table, but they have this massive bar that kind of winds through the whole restaurant. So if you're fine sitting at the bar, if you just kind of walk back and forth around it, you'll get a spot pretty easily. We went on a Tuesday at dinner time. The whole place was packed, but there was 2 spots open at the bar and we were able to get a spot and eat. So started with an old fashioned. That is JP's drink of choice. We get them everywhere. For an appetizer, we had a hummus plate, which was more so for me. JP doesn't really like hummus for some reason, but I love it everywhere. And we also shared these meatballs that also came with some garlic bread. For our entree, we shared these steak frites, and it came with this sauce glaze, and that was super delicious. All of that ended up being too much food, so we didn't get any dessert. And we were going to the ghost tour across the street right after, so we also didn't want to like stuff ourselves and have to like walk around for an hour like in a food coma. So we were pacing ourselves a bit. And we like to do, most of the time when we travel, we don't really get 2 entrees. We'll usually do 1 entree and an appetizer or 2, or like an appetizer and dessert, and just kind of split all of it so that we can try more things. Next place I recommend is the Round Robin Bar. It is located inside the Willard InterContinental Hotel, which has been around since 1847. It's a circular kind of wraparound bar. It's been very famous in politics over the years. They're known for their mint julep, and we also got their barrel old fashioned because, again, we get old fashions everywhere. So this was their mint julep. When we were there, actually, it was the day that the Florida Gators team was visiting the White House after winning the national championship. So I believe that would have been basketball. And one of the other people sitting at the bar had some association with the team. And then when we left the bar, we saw players in their Florida Gators gear, like carrying bags that had the Florida Gators branding. And it was very clearly the Florida Gators basketball team. So that was kind of cool. Another place, this is just a random one that we found. We were staying at the Canopy Hilton on Embassy Row. So when we were walking down to the mall every day, we passed a handful of restaurants all the time. And this is one that we went by, and I love Italian food. I could eat pasta every day. So we decided to stop in here one night, and I had kind of looked it up afterwards, and apparently it's like at least at the time, it was like pretty hard to get into and they were always booked up, but we just walked in and we were like, do you have availability for 2? And they were like, as long as you don't stay more than like 1 hour or like an hour and a half. Like it wasn't even anything that unrealistic. And we're like, sure. Like I don't want to stay here all night anyway. Like I just want to eat my food and go. So they gave us a table. I had the chicken parmesan with the bucatini noodles, and JP had vodka sauce with meatballs, and that also had noodles. And we were too full to try dessert since we ended up with 2 entrees that time, so we didn't have like anything else, but they were delicious. A great place to go if you are up by the Capitol building and Supreme Court, Library of Congress area. Just down the street is We the Pizza. It is you order up at the counter. They have a whole kind of buffet line of everything that they sell. You just order up at the counter and they'll bring it to you. They have a variety of different types of pizzas. They also have like wings and stuff. So we got the Detroit pepperoni and the Ace and West cowboy pie slices. And we also got some garlic knots, and JP had some wings. That place was really nice. It was also rainy that day, so like pizza just sounded so good. Our favorite Chinese restaurant is China Boy in Chinatown, and I actually just noticed for our upcoming trip, it is across the street from the hotel that we're staying at this time, so I was like, oh, maybe we'll go back to China Boy. At the time that we went, it was the highest rated Chinese restaurant in the area, like if you go on Yelp and TripAdvisor and all that stuff. At the time you're watching this, that may or may not be the case still, but we absolutely loved it. It had the pork steamed buns, the pork fried rice, and combination noodles. And we actually tried to go back a second time, like when we were there for our road trip. We were gonna like just get some for the road to take home, and it was like the 1 day a week that they were closed, so we're like, dang, can't eat that. If you venture outside of DC, so one of the times we visited, we stayed over in National Harbor, which is Maryland, just kind of across the way. Brass Tap is a regional chain. I had been there. I went to St. Leo University for college. It's like 45 minutes north of Tampa. At the mall nearby, they had a Brass Tap, so I was very familiar with that. So I was like, cool, safe choice, safe option. You know what you're gonna get. We shared a burger and fries and tater tots. And so that's a really nice place to go to. National Harbor, by the way, is kind of like this small little district of like shops, restaurants, hotels, and they have like a big Ferris wheel on the water. So it's a cool place to check out if you have extra time. Also in National Harbor is an Irish pub called the Irish Whisper. I actually don't have any photos of when we went, but what's funny is JP had ordered a Macallan, so it's just like a shot of whiskey. I don't think it's bourbon, I think it's just whiskey. Scotch whiskey. And they didn't have the one that he had asked for. And they're like, oh, we have this other one. And JP's like, okay. So he gets the bill, and it was like an $80 shot. And he's like, oh my gosh. Like, why would you not say that to somebody if what they were asking for was probably like 20 something dollars, and you're like, oh, I have this $80 thing instead? That's probably something you should say. So we got the bill and we were like, well, okay then. Now we know, always ask. So where to stay when you go to DC? I really enjoy staying in town as much as possible to just be able to walk around and not have to rely on like public transportation or driving and parking somewhere. So on our most recent trip, we stayed at the Canopy by Hilton Embassy Row. It's a little farther. It's about a good like 20-25 minute walk to the National Mall, but you're going kind of on like a downhill slope the whole time. It's not massive, because even when you're going back, you don't feel like you're going uphill the whole time. But when you're getting there, you feel like you're making a little extra progress. It's walkable, but it's not the most one. There's some other places that are a little bit closer that don't cost too much more than this one, but I have a video here of the 2-queen deluxe room that we had. The only thing is like a lot of the DC hotels are like valet parking only, and it'll be like $50, $60, $70 depending on the room rate. Sometimes that's better or easier than having to drive in and find a place to park every day. With this one just being walkable, we were like, you know, we'll splurge a little bit on this, because also remember, 90% of your entertainment that you're going to do in DC is going to be free. So that kind of frees up your budget to spend a little more for a hotel or for parking than you normally would. On our upcoming trip, so depending on when you're watching this, another one may be added here. We're going to stay at the Motto by Hilton. It is one of their kind of like boutique brands. It's next to the Capital One Arena. What's weird about that one though is all the rooms are either like a full-sized bed, a queen bed, or like bunk beds. But also their parking is like less than $30 a night. So we were like, we can squeeze into a queen bed for, you know, a couple nights just to, you know, save 10-15 minutes of walking every day, be in a slightly different spot from before for exploring. So that'll be interesting to check. If you want to stay outside of town though and, you know, save a little bit or just not be in all of that, the Club Wyndham National Harbor is really nice. We had booked a 1-bedroom, but they had upgraded us to a 2-bedroom when we got there. And it's nice to have all that like shopping and dining right outside your door, especially if you're staying for like a longer trip where you're not necessarily going into DC every single day. So this video here has kind of the walkthrough tour. So these have like a full kitchen, 2 bathrooms, a nice balcony. We really enjoyed staying there. So that's everything that I have for the DC 3-day itinerary. I recommend pairing a DC visit to places like Williamsburg, Philadelphia, Boston, even New York. You'll get to see a lot of things from like Revolutionary War, colonial era type of stuff will all kind of be in this one trip. And if you need help planning a road trip, I do have this little workshop that comes with a road trip planner to help you kind of map out everything and keep it organized. It just asks for your email address and then it'll send it to you. And that's everything I have for the Washington, D.C. 3-day itinerary.